Hi, this is Dan Sullivan. I'd like to welcome you to the Multiplier Mindset Podcast. Today's game changer transformation is a great person I've met within the past 2 years, Ben Hardy. And I met Ben at Genius Network, which is the great high-level marketing platform that Joe Polish has created. Joe and I are great partners in podcasts, 10 Times Talk, and his insights on marketing have transformed my thinking. So he's got a 25K where you invest $25,000 a year. And he's got another one where you invest $100,000 per person. I do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about investing in yourself, what that does for your psychology. But Ben came up to me at the first meeting, and he said, the reason I signed up for this program was to meet Joe and to meet you, because I've been following your books and your audios and your videos for a number of years, and I had to be here to meet you. That was really terrific, and I was delighted to meet Ben because Ben is one of the greatest blog writers in the world. So the internet has really exploded the opportunity for individuals who are really good blog writers. And Ben writes on a lot of different mediums. He's one of the most read, one of the most downloaded blog writers in the world. And I've been looking for Ben for a long time. And to double the pleasure of meeting Ben, I found out that he's getting his PhD in psychology. And he's been at this in one way or another, his interest in psychology since birth. And he said, you know, the way that you coach, the way that you teach in Strategic Coach is supported by every cutting-edge psychological concept in the world that's now being studied in psychological circles around the world. And he said, I don't think you have a psychology background, but he said, I have to tell you, the way that you're approaching Strategic Coach is so in alignment with some of the most advanced discoveries about how people learn best. So, I mean, he had me at hello when he talked about me that way. And then Ben and I and Babs have become great, great friends since we first met, and then he joined the 10 Times program. I think probably the bait that Ben took when he came to Strategic Coach was our newest concept and the most transformative concept that we've created in the first 30 years of Strategic Coach. And that is who, not how. So that when you have a goal for something bigger and better, you intellectually engage with it, you emotionally commit to it, but you don't do it. You find someone else who will actually do the how of achieving your goal, and more, you just become a person who identifies bigger and better results for yourself and for other people. And then you resist the temptation, you refrain from doing the how, and then as much as possible, you explain the what and why of the project, and then you get other people who have much better skills than you to actually do the hows. And this has transformed the entire Strategic Coach. And Ben just loves this concept. And he said it's the dividing line between exponentially growing entrepreneurs and rugged individualists who have to do all the how. They don't trust other people to be the who's who actually do the hows. So it's been a great, great fundamental breakthrough for us to get Ben's reading on us, because he reads everything else, but he's also totally become an advocate in his writings for the who, not how approach to entrepreneurial life. So it's a tremendous pleasure to have met Ben. It's like the great ending line in the movie Casablanca, where Humphrey Bogart says, I believe this is going to be the beginning of a wonderful relationship.
So my name is Benjamin Hardy. I've been the #1 writer in the world at Medium.com for the past 3.5 years. And in that time, I've been able to go from 0 to over 400,000 email subscribers without using paid ads. And it's allowed me to become like a best-selling author, make a 7-figure online business where I'm basically living from wherever I want. And I just want to tell you that one of the reasons I've been able to do this is because of Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach. I literally would not be able to do what I've done. And by the way, I'm still trying to finish my PhD. I've been able, as a PhD student with 3 kids, to be able to create a 7-figure business and become like a best-selling author. And it's because Dan Sullivan, his teaching and his work has taught me literally how to be super productive with my time, how to know what to do with my time, how to think bigger about my future. And I'm still just learning at the freaking tip of the iceberg what Dan Sullivan has to teach. But I've been studying Dan's work for the past 4 years. And if you read any of my articles, you'll see him sprinkled throughout all my work, because he taught me the mindsets, the perspectives, and the strategies that allowed me to use the little time I had in the most impactful way, how to change my thinking, how to change everything I do. So the reason I've been able to do what I've been able to do is because of the strategies that Dan Sullivan has taught me at Strategic Coach. Then when I joined Strategic Coach, he's allowing me to not only take the success that I've gotten in my past, but he's helped me to learn how to create this hugely bigger future, how to build a team around me. And I know that in the next 12 months, I'm going to be able to 10x the results I've had in the past. So if you're thinking about joining Strategic Coach, do it. Whether you're an author, whether you're a creative, whether you're a successful entrepreneur, if you're wanting to have a better life at home, if you're wanting to take your work to the next level, and if you feel like you're busy, he's going to force you to rethink your time. And he's going to help you get results rather than just focusing on being busy. Like, you're going to actually learn how to get bigger and better results than anyone else, how to be more creative than anyone else, and how to separate yourself in a very competitive environment. So I can just honestly say, as someone who's been studying Dan for a while, that I wouldn't be where I'm at without Dan Sullivan's work. And now being a member of Strategic Coach, I know that my success is only going to get 10x bigger. Dan has been doing this for 30, 40 years. And I study psychology as a science. And what I look at is stress and recovery. That's how I look at everything as far as learning, is you stress something out and then you recover and you check it out. And that's how you learn. And so what I got out of this is, for the next 90 days, and he's built it in 90-day sequences, which is honestly not a secret. It's so based on science. That's what I love about Dan's stuff, is he's intuited. His stuff resonates with me on a million levels. This is exactly what the science shows is the most effective for learning and high performance. So you put yourself in this high level environment. You had to invest money to be in there. That in and of itself changes your psychology towards it. You're invested, you're motivated, you're around a bunch of other people. So the energy is just different. And your receptivity to the ideas becomes very different. So when I get to see that myself and say, okay, wow, this is what Dan's doing, and these ideas obviously work because I've applied them to get to this level, what it did for me is it told me, when you're in the environment, literally, and when you're there with Dan, when you're learning these ideas with a bunch of other people who are receptive to these ideas, then it has the emotional impact. And so for me, emotionally, and that's one of the things he says you need to do, is you need to have an intellectually stimulating better future, but then you have to emotionally commit to it. And I think that that's the difference, is when you're listening to it on your headphones or on a podcast, you can get that. It takes more repetition. You got to listen to this podcast for a year potentially to get the same impact as you could in one day of being in the emotional climate, of being right there with him, feeling his energy, feeling the energy of the room and all that's been built to get here. So you can emotionally invest yourself into your bigger and better future a lot faster if you just put yourself here. Number one, because you invested yourself to be here, which puts you into a place of vulnerability to yourself to actually commit yourself to bigger things. That's one of the things I've studied in psychology for the last 4 years, is how do you get someone to fully commit to something? What's that one thing that a person can do to make a really powerful decision? And it almost always ties back to a financial investment. Literally, when someone financially invests in a goal or into an environment or a relationship, they become hyper committed to that thing. And then they begin building their identity around it. And so when I invested $25,000 to be in that room, and then I'm hearing the ideas, and Dan's giving me these amazing strategies about how to think bigger and better about my future. And then all of a sudden I start playing with my imagination and saying, okay, what do I really want to do? And then he lays out these simple structures of, well, here's how you do it. Then I'm like, oh my gosh. What you do is you've emotionally invested yourself in this huge future, and then you have this playbook, these simple strategies that he's tested for decades. Then you start to actually believe you can do it. So not only do you have this emotional commitment where you're like, oh my gosh, this is real, but then you're like, I can do it, because he's just given you the playbook. And because I've been applying these ideas for 5 years, over that time I've been able to build confidence that I can do bigger and better futures. But when you're in the room, he forces you to think 10x bigger than that. The worst thing a writer could believe, or any creative person could believe, is that their best work is behind them. That's the freakiest thing to ever believe. Is I don't know if I can actually do what I just did. I got here, but I don't know if I can go there. And what I have now is this self-confidence that my best work, and I don't even know what that's going to look like, is in my future. And that's what Dan tries to help you believe, is that your future is always bigger than your past. Not only are you going to be more creative and have more fun, but you're going to be way more successful. In the next year, I'm going to do the best writing in my life. I already know that because I've built this ecosystem around me and I'm surrounding myself with people like Dan, and I'm committing to scary, bigger futures that excite me and that are going to change me. One of the things that's really cool about when you start investing in yourself is that you're willing to initiate action and then figure it out after. And people would fit that into the quick start mentality, but for me, it's actually about, like in psychology, there's two types of behavior. There's either approach behavior or avoid. You're either trying to approach something, which means you're more focused on the rewards versus the risks. Like you're willing to deal with the risks to get your rewards. If you're avoid focused, then you're focusing on the risks. And so you're not so sure the rewards are worth it. But what I would challenge even like small type, solopreneurs, freelancers, or things like that is to hire people before you feel ready. It's crazy. What I call it is a forcing function. Basically, you put yourself in a situation where you now have someone who you've now delegated a bunch of responsibility to. That now puts you in a position where you have to show up. If I would have hired someone, and by the way, you can hire people, you could hire digital assistants, but I've hired a bunch of part-time people. And you can hire someone for like $1,000 a month. They're part-time working, and they can free you up to do work where you could easily 10x, 20x, 100x that if you're in your creative zone. So I'm now more willing to bring a lot of people on and build this thing out and figure it out as I go. I know that if I'm actually in my creative zone, if I'm actually taking risks, and if I'm actually moving forward, that the potential impact is really infinite. And that to me is fun because then you're always learning. And one of the things that Dan said that's really been striking me lately is he says, if you're just trying to maintain, the world can't use you. And admittedly, when you become successful at something and you just start to kind of fall into a role where you're just going through the motions, then you just can get into this place where you're just now trying to maintain this thing where you've gotten to. And honestly, that's where I was at for about a year in my writing, was I had reached this level where I could do something really easy because I developed this capacity, this skill, where I could just jump on and write articles and they went viral without me trying. I could just jump on and just, literally, I wouldn't put a lot of emotional energy into it. And I stopped doing it for the why, and I had lost my why, but I was in this position where it was easy. And so I was just trying to maintain. But the world subconsciously can respond to that. And they can tell that you're not in this cycle of growth. So over time, I think it was obvious to everyone that I wasn't in this place of growth. But what's interesting, and if you really look at Strategic Coach, it's always evolving, right? Because Dan is in this place of student constantly, and that's why it's so attractive to people. It doesn't have to be perfect. It will never be perfect. But because it's in a state of growth and evolution, people are interested in it. So what I am learning now is it doesn't matter how big the future I want is, as long as I'm in this student mode where I'm figuring it out and learning, as messy as that looks, that's what brings people with you. That's what's appealing. That's what's interesting. It's not about having the answers. It's about seeking some huge future, and the energy behind that produces really, really powerful transformation. So if you're trying to maintain, you're stuck, and the world will know, and it has nothing to do with you. But if you're willing to grow on this steep growth curve, everyone's going to feel that, and they're going to want to jump on board. Traditional approaches to growth can't create 10 times growth. They just can't. So if you're wanting to put more hours in, you can't 10x your hours working probably, right? If you want to do it through willpower and just hard work and grit, it doesn't work. It literally requires a different fundamental approach. 10 times growth is very doable. I've experienced it, but it takes a different perspective. And I think that that's what Dan is trying to help people experience. Me, myself, I started writing like 4 years ago online. And every year I've been able to 10x my income for 4 years. And I'm actually going to attempt it now again. Basically, it goes from like literally, because as a PhD student, you're making $12,000 a year. Well, actually, it was 3 years in a row, but it was like 12,000, 120,000, then over $1 million. But how do you do it at every step of the way? And what Dan teaches you is what got you here won't get you there. The behaviors that get you to one level are the ones that are going to crush you at the next level. So how you actually do it is, number one, you focus on who instead of how. And I think that the reason why people think in terms of, doubling their income is because they're thinking about how. They immediately begin thinking, how can I do more? Or what else do I need to do? Dan says, stop thinking that way. He says, start thinking about the who's in your world. There's other brilliant people who can help you do far better at these millions of things that you're doing. They can do it better than you, and they can be way more creative than you, and they can create better solutions than you. And then you need to focus on taking your thing to the sky. As far as like just the mindset for people, one of the things that I believe in as far as the mindset is your future has to be super exciting. If it's exciting, one of my quotes that I live by is when the why is strong enough, you'll figure out the how. Or the bigger the why, the easier the how. But if you 10x your goal, whatever it is. And one of the things that Dan says, number one, is it doesn't need to be next year. He actually has the life extender concept where it actually doesn't have to be next year. You can do this over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Don't stress yourself out about time. You've got all the time in the world to do this. So I think that that's one thing that's helpful. If you have this thing that's already pretty successful and you want to 10x it, first off, eliminate the worry of time. That's the first thing that Dan helps you realize is time is okay. Time is on your side. And a lot of people don't believe that. And I think that that's the first thing, is to realize time is on your side. And then number two is to realize, what are the things that I need to do that will create that result as effectively as possible? He teaches you that it's not about time and effort. That's the how approach. It's about getting the right result. What is the most effective way to get the result? So I'll just riff off of my own concept. Like right now I have an online course that I have 1,000 people in, and I want to have 10,000 people in it in 1 year. So that's 10x. What got me to 1,000 people is radically different than what's going to help me to get to 10,000 people. So how do I find those who's? Well, in this case, for me, I have to get good at a few things that I've never been good at before. I have to get really good at webinars. I have to get good at ads. I've never done those things. I've just been a writer. But in order to get to the 10x of my goal, I have to be willing to be super fluid and learn things that I haven't learned before. So what do is I found myself someone who's freaking amazing at webinars and ads. She's my who. And her team is, they have their how. So I invested big in her in developing a partnership. And that's part of what Dan's model is. How do you collaborate with people who are so brilliant already at what they do? And so it's like, I have the content. She's got the webinars and ads. We're going to come together. Because it's a partnership, she gets a good chunk of the money. And she's super committed in watching me succeed. She's just as invested. She's got skin in the game. So now I'm going down and I spend like 5 days with her. We film like 50 ads. We test them. She coaches me through webinars. She helps me build audiences to test the webinars on it. So eventually, 4 or 5 months from now, I'm going to be an expert at that. And then we just learn how to scale it and we fail it up. So I think just to pull all this mess together, I already know that I can take my thing 10x because I've found the right who's, and the who's had the right strategies. And I'm willing to learn those strategies. I'm willing to be emotionally flexible and learn things and get good at things that I wasn't good at before. Transfer my learning from writing to, let's just say, doing webinars in this case, and having the right coach, right mentor, right person who already has been doing it at a world-class level, show me exactly how, and then let her take care of the how, and then just be hyper committed to the goal. That's another thing that Dan says is like, you have to have this bigger and better future that you're clear on. It's got to be intentionally interesting, emotionally, you got to be committed to it, and that's why I love his impact filters. It's because you have to buy yourself into it because you're about to go to a place you've never gone before. It's going to be emotionally taxing. That's why you have to be emotionally flexible. But then you have to have the right who's or else you're screwed. You can't do it. Like with willpower, you can't do it. This is fun. And if you get the right hows, you get to experience this wave. And then every 90 days you look back and you measure the gain, right? Rather than the gap. And you're like, holy crap, look what just happened, where you're constantly feeling momentum. You're focused on this bigger and better future where you're in this learning state. You're surrounded by a totally different team doing new stuff and you succeed. It's just fun. So I think that that's why going 10x is cool, is that not only is it possible, it's different. It requires you to be a different person. You get to develop new capacities, you get new who's, and you get to fail and learn. And then every 90 days, you get to look back and be blown away by all you did. So why I think strategic coach is essential for any entrepreneur is that, number one, it gives you space. You learn from someone who's been coaching entrepreneurs at all levels about how they can get to their next level. It doesn't matter how successful you've been in the past or even how good things are going right now. You're probably not functioning as optimally as you could. You could accelerate your growth. You could do things enormously better and more efficient. And most companies are radically mismanaged. They just are. So what Dan helps the entrepreneur realize is that there's better systems that can be put in place. There's better ways that your people can be utilized. There's better ways for the entrepreneur to be their most effective self. And if the entrepreneur is not in this amazing place, then everything below them is falling apart, even if it's moving forward. I just think it's essential for myself as an entrepreneur to constantly have a system where every 90 days I have a really clear system in place where I know that the next 90 days they're focused on something very specific, and that in those 90 days I get to come back and report to myself and to people who are at a high level what happened. And I think if a person doesn't have a check-in on themselves, like an amazing system where they're really checking in and getting clear. This is one of the things I'm noticing when I'm at Strategic Coach, is that even people who have huge companies, they realize immediately based on the questions that are asked here, oh my gosh, I've been focused on the wrong things. Most people are focused on the 80 rather than the 20, right? The 80% of things that may or may not be getting results. And they're not giving enough energy and effort to the right who's. Just as an example, like yesterday, one of the people realized his number one priority is obviously bringing in big clients, but he realized that the person who actually does that, like their lead marketing person, the person who's closest to the people who actually make this happen, he hasn't had a functional relationship with that person where they operate at a high level. And if he invested a little bit more into that relationship, they probably would potentially 10x their income fast. So what it helps you realize is, what are the right relationships I need to invest in? How can I optimize my people who are making the biggest impact on our company? So it functions at all levels.
You know, I was very gratified by Ben's response to his first 10 times workshop, because what he's seen for himself now is the goal that I have for every client, every entrepreneur in Strategic Coach, and that is that they feel themselves freed up from their past. In other words, that they very quickly simplify the right activities for themselves. They create a team around them. They create a very positive environment everywhere they are. So they feel increasingly freed up from what they had to do in the past to get to where they are. And now what lies ahead of them is just bigger and better goals, bigger and better commitments, bigger and better teamwork, and bigger and better transformations. And he's been just to one workshop, so this is really quite a remarkable mindset transformation on Ben's part, just because of the first 8 hours that he spent with us. So it's a wonderful story, and I'm going to make sure that he lives up to this. So for you to get an inside look on what is making Ben Hardy so excited, one of the great writers in the world right now, and why he sees his future as incomparably bigger than everything that he's achieved so far, go to our great little book, whonothow.coach.